get up north and get all goo goo gaga over the scenery, there's one thing I want to talk to you about regarding cultural appropriation and magical practice, or any type of spiritual practice. Even in fiction, it's really important to avoid cultural appropriation, and that can be, it shouldn't be controversial because we should all have a similar definition of what cultural appropriation is, but there is some back and forth on some practices, for example, voodoo, on, whether it is a closed door practice, meaning invitation only, based on your cultural heritage or ancestral heritage, versus being open to, so I'm trying to say two different things. A lot of closed door practices are invitation only, but a lot of them are cultural or racially split. So in hoodoo, some people say that people who aren't African American can't practice it because it's African American syncretized practical magic based in Yoruba, West African spirituality. And generally speaking, that's true. Same thing is true of Native American and a lot of similar indigenous practices. You're not allowed to, like if you're Maori or whatever, you're not even allowed to have the tattoos unless you are of that culture. So I think it's Maori. Maybe it's Aborigine. Sorry, excuse me if I got that wrong. So this is based on two things. One, a lot of these cultures have been exploited in the extreme and oppressed systemically by dominant cultures that invaded their lands and called their religion evil, etc., demonized their entire culture, wouldn't let them speak their language, and attempted genocide. So it's not cool, obviously, to come in and be like, inspire me, let me learn from your cultural wisdom that my, people ignored, and then exploit them again for what usually turns into something that's monetized as a brand, such as some sort of guru saying they have some secret Amazonian shamanic ritual to sell you blah, blah, blah. So that's obviously not cool, and that I think is somewhat situational, but those are the general guidelines. The other aspect of it, though, is that a lot of Westerners from European backgrounds, such as myself, are taught our cultural heritage, which is that any type of herbal healing, medicine, or magical craft would be based on some sort of recipe and some sort of, chemistry, either herbally or how it affects the body or something like that. Most indigenous traditions, including those in Europe that were taken over as long ago as Roman times, actually base their magic in relationship with the ancestors, the ancestral spirits of that tradition, such as if you were in a martial arts tradition that had a spiritual component, that would be the lineage of the masters in the tradition. And if it is not chemically powered, but it is relationship powered, or it is ancestrally permitted to do something, then two things happen. One, you risk pissing off the spirits of that tradition who are not going to work with you, which is why a lot of people think that this sort of stuff doesn't work, is because they don't have permission, so it doesn't work. And two, it's based on good, respectful, reciprocal relationship with whatever entity, dynamic, archetype, or consciousness you're working with. So if I demand something, like I'm conjuring something up in hoodoo, likely to get my butt kicked, frankly, because the power is not coming from any type of spell. They don't even call it spells. It's working makings. It's coming from how much you've cultivated a relationship to that entity or archetype. So, the other thing I want to say about this is there's a lot that someone who's in a practice can't or won't tell you because you won't understand it, because they're not allowed to talk about certain things that are closed door practices. And I used to think that that was gatekeeping. Sometimes it is. But people can misuse this type of knowledge, and there's also an element of protecting it in a limited lineage so that it doesn't get, the knowledge itself is protected and doesn't get diluted. So there's a certain protectionism that goes for protecting the knowledge more than for protecting people, which is interesting. I agree with that now that I've seen what can happen when you don't do it, but it did not come to me intuitively to do things that way. So that's a little primer on this stuff. So if you're writing a book that has your own magic system that's not based in any cultural tradition, then there's a lot more leeway on that, but you don't want to be, having your characters wear blackface or moccasins or that kind of stuff, no matter what alien culture they supposedly come from. You just steer away from it. Why am I in hoodoo? That's a video for another day, but basically I was adopted in because of my background, because of my commitments and values to something very similar, and because I received life-saving help from hoodoo and found a Black African-American mentor among several others to teach me, to make sure that this was okay. Since it is relatively closed door, I'm only talking about the structure, some of the rules, and the physics or the mechanics of it for this channel, and I'm only going to tell you a little bit about how it inspired my work. It's not an educational channel, and this is not an open invitation to get into a practice that most of the time you should not be involved in this unless you are African American heritage or you have Appalachian ancestors that have granny magic in their traditions or blended Native American craft, because all that kind of comes from the same region, but it's mostly African American, and was the result of the transatlantic slave trade. So we need to be respectful of that. So that's my spiel. Now let's go up north and have a really cool weekend.